Good evening, punters, and welcome to another episode of The Tripod, where we break down every NRL game every week from a punting perspective. Another good week last week, going 13-8 on best bets. So we have done very well since the restart of the season. Probably a few new followers this week. So basically what we do is we run through all 8 games from a betting perspective, give out some best bets, and you guys win some money. Jacob, you looking forward to this round?
Mate, more than a pretty good start. It's been a fantastic first month of the season, 5 rounds in. We almost can't promise to keep up that winning rate. 68% we hit since the season resumed, but what we can promise, we always do our best, and things are looking up unless you live in Victoria. If you do, please stay vigilant, stay positive. You're going to get through. But what I mean is, in general, things are looking up. You're going to the footy tomorrow, or is that the Saturday game? No, tomorrow night.
Tomorrow.
Sorry.
You're right.
Yep. And a lot of teams are playing at their true home grounds this week, and there's going to be people there. So that's all exciting. One other housekeeping, we take a very close look at our record and our statistics that we put out to you guys. You will notice our overall profit. Just as an example, if you put 100 per best bet, it's about $174 higher than it was on the recap. And you're thinking, but we haven't won any bets since then. We uncovered that we actually forgot to add the profit of a Monday game back in June the 8th where we went 2-0. So that was uncovered today. We did a full deep dive, checked all our numbers. The best bet record was always correct. We counted the 2 wins in the best bet, but we didn't count the profit there. So that's just an explanation.
So as well as we've been doing, selling ourselves even a little bit short. Like you mentioned, Jacob, that started off with the Thursday night game. It is what will probably be the game of the round. The Storm are plus 6.5 points. The total sitting at 35.5. And like Jacob said, I will be going to this one. And a little caveat before we release our best bets. I've been to many games at Suncorp, mostly Broncos games, and I would say that I do not have a very good record of going there, betting the game myself, and actually watching it. So just take these bets with a grain of salt. But yeah, it should be an absolutely cracking game. It's really a shame that both teams have copped a few injuries last week. Obviously, no Munster for the Storm, which is the biggest loss for both teams. And I mean, we always talk about value over replacement. I mean, Riley Jacks takes Munster's place, but Jacks isn't great, but at least he has some first grade experience there. But I still think that the Storm will really struggle because Munster just, he does everything for that team. Now, once again, Addo-Carr and Christian Welch named, but they might not play either. So that's another reason that you might be leaning towards the Roosters in this one. I know a lot of people will be tempted to take the points with the Storm here, but I think the Roosters get the job done. I think both teams should be at their best and motivated for this one. Both teams played, relatively easy-ish games last week. Plus the Roosters, had people rested, etc. throughout the season, including last week. But look, the Roosters are coming in slightly healthier. They are a level above every other team in the comp, and at a neutral venue like Suncorp, I'd lay the short points with the Roosters here.
I mentioned most teams are at their true home ground. The Storm are one side that isn't.
Correct.
The other is New Zealand. The Storm had to relocate to Queensland, play this one at Suncorp. They've got plenty of fans in the Sunshine State. I would say it is such a shame Munster's out, because I look at these sides, they've both got quality forward packs, even with the loss of Radley. Like Butcher is another guy who was rested last week with niggles, comes back in. No Radley replacement, but they do have depth. But the real stark difference in this game to me is Luke Keary, and just the command that he is playing with and the outside backs that he's got to connect with. And obviously J-Moz and Teddy were both rested last week. They both come in. Everyone knows what that will add to their attack. But don't underestimate what that adds to their defense. Teddy is organising, his try-saving, and we know the Morris brothers are so sound defensively as well. You mentioned Addo-Carr and Welsh, both HIA, that could be a big loss. And we're really high on the Storm. We think that they're actually undervalued by the public. We think they're a real contender this year. We've been on them a few times. We think, if anything, Roosters are too highly coveted by most punters, so it's hard to get at them. This is a rare case in a big game. We're actually going to be on the chook, so we think that they should just be at least a converted try better than the Storm in this situation.
And it's funny because this is going against your rule, Jacob, of in the game of the round, you've got to take the underdog, which I disagree with. But look, we are on the Roosters here. We do have 3 best bets for now. We're taking the Roosters laying 4.5 points. That's $1.83 on Unibet. All of these bets on Unibet. We're going to take the Roosters team total over 19.5 points at $1.80. And we're going to take the Storm to score under 2.5 tries. That one is $1.85.
And I did want to add, it's a mammoth task for Riley Jacks and in the halves, although we know what they could do. Brandon Smith could come on at 9 and Cam Smith might play in the halves. But even that being the case, this Roosters team so hard to score against. I like those plays.
Absolutely. Let's move on to the Friday early game. It is the Raiders up against the Dragons, and the Raiders hosting for the first time since the restart. The Raiders are 10-point favourites, and the total sitting at 38.5. Now, for the Raiders, just an absolutely brutal loss against the Eels last week. To come all the way back and then lose by 1 point is pretty brutal. So I do question a little bit this Raiders team's mental state after that game. Now, reasons to think that they will be a bit of a letdown this week. Obviously, you come back, an emotional loss to the Eels, and you think it's going to be a little bit of a letdown. But reasons to think they'll get up for this one. They're still 7th on the ladder. They're not going to come in defeated. They know they're a shot at the top 8, and with a few injuries to those upper echelon teams, a shot at the top 4 still. Now, you lose Rapana and Horsburgh for this one, but you get back Tapine, which is a boost, I think. In terms of the Dragons, we were on them last week against the Roosters, and I didn't think they played too badly. And, even though they only scored 12 points, I think that the Dragons can put on a couple of points, especially because I think that their stats are still a little bit suppressed from, those games earlier on during the restart where they didn't quite have the right roster construction. So I think you've got to add maybe a point or two to this Dragons team totals moving forward now that they've actually found that. So I think even though it's going to be a little bit chilly there on Friday, I think both of these teams can score some points. So we are going to be on the over in this one.
I like the point you just made there because it comes to mind, they got a goose egg against the Warriors. They only scored 2 points against the Bulldogs, this Dragons team. So their average per game is low. I didn't think they were great last week against the Roosters. Obviously, they lost by 14 and the Roosters had a lot of adversity, but they were putting in. It's a team that now at least has a little bit of confidence, and we said they've got the right mix. Now, the Raiders, tough to swallow loss, obviously. How do they rebound? We're not sure. And they've also kind of suffered a second loss. It's official. Bateman won't be there next year, and Ricky's had a little cry about it as he can be prone to do. So you worry, but I think first game at home in front of GIO, not only to play in front of home fans, the first game they don't have to travel on game day has to suit them down to the ground. And what I was impressed by with the Raiders, they do have some positives to take out of the Eels' loss in that the way they fought back, they came back, and also to score 24 against the Eels, and that they were happy to spread the ball wide. They were happy to get the ball to their edges early and often. I think if they play that way, you look at the youngsters that are in this Dragons backline like Saab, Ravalawa's inexperienced, Lomax in the centers, they're going to have a lot of traffic coming their way. I think there's points in the Raiders, but there also could be a couple points in the Dragons. So again, that's why we like the overs.
Indeed, we've got 3 best bets on the game so far. We're taking the Dragons team total over 12.5 points. That's $1.80 on Bet365. Over 6.5 tries for the game. That's $1.90 on Ladbrokes and Neds. We're going to take the Raiders team total over 23.5 points. That's $1.85 on Ladbrokes and Neds as well. Let's move on to the Friday night game. It is the Eels up against the Cowboys. The line is Eels minus 7.5. The total is 41.5 points. Looked at this line yesterday. I saw that the Cowboys were 8.5 point dogs, and I thought that is a juicy line. Now, the lines come down in most places to under 8, and I think it is the correct move. I know I mentioned last week, the Eels have had game after game after game that has just been super tough, emotionally and physically draining games, and I think last week will be no different. Not only do you lose your leader, Mitchell Moses, but also you come back and win that game you win that game by 1 point. That's going to take it out of them, and now you get to play the Cowboys at home. I think finally this Eels team may have a little bit of a letdown here. Now, we mentioned before with no Munster, Riley Jacks comes in. Now, no Mitchell Moses, you get Jai Field come in, and I think when you talk about value over replacement, that's a pretty big gap there for the Eels to make up. I really do think they're due for a letdown. It's just been a brutal stretch for them. Manly, tough game. Panthers, comeback win. Roosters, obviously, brutal game. And then the Raiders last week. So I think it's a bad spot for the Eels. In terms of the Cowboys, maybe not the best spot to take them. I mean, they played against a Knights team that was just absolutely woeful. But when you get to these, worse teams, I guess I think of it as a confidence-boosting win. And maybe it's just one of those wins you get over a decent team that played bad that could get your confidence up. I said the same thing about when the Sharks beat the Dogs, a couple of weeks ago. Sometimes that's all you need is to get that one win. Not only that, but I think you have, a discrepancy here where Val Holmes hasn't been named, but if he comes back, I think that certainly adds some spark to that Cowboys attack, and it's looking like he's getting closer and closer every single day. So I like the Cowboys here to take it to the Eels at Bankwest.
You hit on all the key points there. I think if you go back to the Eels flogging the Broncos by 30 in the season reopener, I know that was May 28, but roughly the last month of footy the Eels have played, I think if they hold on to that late lead against Roosters, and they did lead them with 20 to go, it's probably the best month the Parramatta Football Club has played since the 80s.
Yep.
Like, they have played at such a high level every week. It's hard to maintain, especially Jai Field, while he is a running threat. Similar to Moses, he is not Mitchell Moses, and especially getting him into the team first game back. And the Cowboys have alleviated a bit of pressure with that good performance last week. It would be important for them to back it up. And this number is actually kind of generous with all those factors considered. So we're going to take the Cowboys.
Indeed, and 3 best bets on the game for now. We've actually got best bets on every single game this week, so we do like the slate. Cowboys plus 8.5 points. You'll find that one at $1.83 on Sportsbet. The Cowboys plus 4.5 in the first half, $1.83 on Sportsbet once again. And on staying on Sportsbet, we're going to take the Cowboys plus 4.5 second half. That one is $1.86, so a little bit of a triple up there on the line and both half lines. Next up, Saturday early game, we've got the Titans up against the Sharkies. This line is Titans plus 5.5. The total sitting at 44.5. It's the highest total of the round, but I think it is warranted. I've said, a number of times this season that the Sharks have kind of, I don't know if anyone else is noticing it, but they've gotten away with it sometimes. The defense is pretty dismal, and there's been a number of times where they've made defensive errors and the opposition hasn't quite capitalized on it. So that's why we kind of think of this Sharky side as an over team. Now, in terms of the Titans, impressive win last week against the Broncos. I mean, the Broncos were bad. But once again, it's one of those ones where maybe when you're a shit team, all you need is that one game to get yourself a little bit of confidence. Although I think the Titans know they're not going to be playing finals footy. But once again, Ash Taylor was brilliant last week. The real question is, can he replicate it this week? Also, a chance for a boost for the Titans, getting Tyrone Roberts back possibly for this one. Now, in terms of the Sharkies, they played awesome last week against Manly. But it's one of those ones where this Sharks team is so full of guys that have all this talent, but sometimes can't put it together. So I question whether the Sharkies can keep this up for the remainder of the season. Shaun Johnson has been very impressive to restart, but once again, don't know if he's going to keep that up. But what tipped me over the edge was this game getting moved to the Goldie. So you're going to have, the Gold Coast fans there. In Queensland, you're allowed more fans, I think, at the stadiums than any other state still at the moment. So I think they're going to come out in force. And although the Titans, don't often get a lot of fans to their home games, I think with that win over the Broncos last week, you might get a few more fans and a bit more optimistic fans at the stadium to help the Titans keep it close.
That's a fair point, considering the Titans took like 363 days to get a win, but now they've won a couple in the space of a couple of weeks. Holbrook, trying to change the culture there. There's positivity around both these clubs because they both had very good confidence boom wins last week. They both also scored a season high points for 2020. That's why, as well as being an afternoon game, why this is the highest total of the round. And we can see points. I mean, you pointed out Shaun Johnson in great touch. When they sweep from left to right and he gets the ball, he can be a running threat, and he's obviously looking at what's in front of him, and in his peripherals, he's watching the winger. All depending on what they do, he's got the perfect kick in behind.
Yep.
He can lay on the short ball if the winger's staying back. And if the winger rushes up, he can loft a beautiful ball to Katoa, who needs about a blade of grass space to get it down. So there's points in the Sharks, but I think there's points in the Titans as well. And you mentioned Ash Taylor. To me, the matchup, if they're to pull an upset here, the Titans, it's Taylor needs to outplay Shaun Johnson. And not many people will expect him to do that, but he's on $1 million a season. He needs to occasionally win that type of matchup. So that'll be good to watch. I think the Sharks have the edge in experience and the edge in their combinations, but I'm not convinced that they have like that many better players. I think there's a fair few Titans that have gone well this year. So I like catching the points with the Titans and a couple of over-based plays.
Indeed, and we've just got the 2 for now. We are going to take the Titans plus 6.5 points. That one's at $1.86 on Unibet. And we're going to take both teams to score 15 or more points. You'll find that one at $1.88 on BetEasy. And correct me if I'm wrong, Jacob, is that the only site that offers that market?
Yeah, others might do like both to 20 or something like that, but I think that specific number, BetEasy, is where you'll find that.
All right, let's move on to the Warriors up against the Broncos. The Warriors are 6-point underdogs, the total sitting at 43.5 points. Neutral venue for this one, Central Coast. Now, I'm not going to spend too much time on this one. I'll let Jacob take the lead because I was indifferent on this one, but he has made some very good arguments that have led me towards the Broncos. I guess in my notes, I kind of had that losing RTS now to a shoulder charge is massive for this Warriors team. I mean, he is the heart and soul of this Warriors team. And he just kind of gets forgotten on that team because they do so badly. But he might mean more to this Warriors team than someone like Turbo means to that Manly team. Just his playmaking ability and even in defense at the back as well. So in terms of the Broncos, and maybe I'm being a bit of a square, but I was just so turned off by them last week. And I know what you're going to say, Jacob, is, you got to take the ugly duckling. And there was no one uglier. Well, no one really uglier than the Broncos losing to the Titans last week. They've done a little bit of a reshuffle. They dropped Oates, which I don't know if I agree with that. I don't think he's been terrible for them, but at least you get Izako back in there, and he's decent kicker. So, I'm with you, Jacob, but you take the lead here.
Well, this is the exact opposite of the previous game where both sides go in with confidence. Both sides come into this one just absolutely embattled. And I know what you're thinking. Warriors lost by 44, 46 last week as well, but they were expected to lose to the Storm, whereas the Broncos had to beat them. And to lose by 18 was absolutely embarrassing. So what have they got going for them this week? I mean, Carrigan and Flegler back from suspension helps. And Lodge may play, may not. I thought Lodge would be out, but he's been named, so that's a boost too. They do lose off Ngawi, but still net positive for the forward pack. The Warriors are still without Eli Katoa. They will get Fusatua back, but you kind of touched on it, RTS. Maybe, we can debate how good he is compared to a Tedesco or a Turbo, but when Tedesco's out for the Roosters, I said this last week, they lift, they still play well. But what these guys in Turbo and RTS mean to their teams rely on them so much. You saw what happened to Manly last week. You just cannot even come close to replacing him. So I think he's worth even more than the market's giving him credit for. I mentioned Brisbane's a front-running team. When they get out, they often play with confidence and can go on with it. There's a good chance they can do this here. This game reminds me a bit of the Dragons when they played the Dogs, and everyone said if they lose that game, Mary's out. And they lost by 20, and Mary was under so much pressure. I actually think once the coach has copped a mountain of shit, it actually becomes the player's responsibility. We've heard it all about how bad the coach is. You're still getting paid to go out and do a job. And I think even if the group doesn't love Siebes, they have pride to earn themselves. This will be the game they do it, and we can still lay under 6 points.
Indeed, and it is a good price and a good line and a good price. The first bet is the Broncos laying 5.5 points. You'll find that one on the $2 lines on Ladbrokes and on Neds. We're also going to take the Broncos team total over 23.5. That is $1.83, also on Ladbrokes and Neds. And staying on the same two sites, we're going to take the Broncos team total over 11.5 points in the first half. That one's $1.80.
Should we just touch on one other thing? We're playing more overs than usual, and your typical punter
we haven't even mentioned it. We talked about it for like 15 minutes amongst ourselves.
Your typical bloke on the street wants to bet overs more than unders because it's more fun to cheer for. Like, who wants to cheer for bloody unders? And what that often means is if there's a half point in it, the bookie shades these totals a little higher because that's where more money will come. And that's why often we like to take the under. But the edict's coming out this week that they're pushing it even further with the 6 again rule to allow even more discretion for the refs when markers aren't square and offside. It's only going to mean even less stoppages, even more repeat sets, and even more fatigue in the defence. And it's just a great time for the NRL to double down, or at this point triple down, on making the product as entertaining and high scoring as possible, especially with the issues the AFL has around their scheduling and the people that have been criticising the style of play in that sport. So rugby league has a chance to really just get a stranglehold, I feel, and there could be a lot of attacking, high scoring, free flowing footy this weekend. We're hoping so, and if there is, we'll cash in.
No, you make a great point, Jacob, and you're absolutely right. We should have mentioned it at the start of the pod, but I mean, you just rewind to when they said we're going to hand out some sin bins for repeated infringements, and we said, there's a high chance there's going to be a sin bin in the first game, in the first half, to make a point of it. I think there was 2 sin bins in that game, and I think there were double-digit sin bins for the week. So you make a very good point in that they're going to make a point of this early and often, and as well as that, when the sin bin came, they weren't copying it from all angles saying this is, a bad product. We need to make this more entertaining. And you make a great point. There's not many other sports on. This is the time for the NRL to clamp down and say we are going to be the most entertaining sport on at the moment. So we do think they make a point of it this week. Let's get to the Tigers-Panthers. The Tigers are 4.5-point underdogs. The total is 36.5 points. This one being played at Bank West, so the Tigers are not at home for this one. Now, with this one, it's an interesting game. These two teams actually probably coming in, especially after last weekend's just bloodbath of injuries, these two teams are probably coming in the healthiest two teams out of anyone at the moment. But the big mismatch in this one, I think, is the forwards. I think the Panthers forwards are much better than this Tigers forwards team. And in the halves as well. I mean, you have Cleary, and I know he struggled a little bit with his goal kicking last week, but by all accounts, that infection is getting better every single day. So I do like the Panthers in this one. I don't like the Tigers' short turnaround off the Sunday game. On top of that, you've got the Panthers' long turnaround off the Thursday game. I think the Panthers are probably coming in a touch underrated given how poor the Rabbits were on Thursday. I think everyone will put that down. Anyone that can watch that game will put it down to how bad the Rabbits were. But at the end of the day, Cleary, I think, missed a bunch of kicks in that one. That the margin could have been bigger. And, the Tigers probably couldn't have played better against the Dogs. One more point that I will add. I know we gave out a value play on the Panthers to win the minor premiership this year because of all the injuries that have happened to the Storm, to the Roosters, to the Eels last weekend. Don't think that these Panthers players don't know. They know that this is a great opportunity for them to go on a run here and quite possibly win the minor premiership. And it all starts with this one. I think the Panthers take care of business here.
I thought you meant don't think that the Panthers don't know the pod has tipped them to win the minor premiership. And the other thing they've got going for them is that I mentioned in my write-up on Monday. They have such a favourable draw. They may not be an underdog for the rest of the year. The toughest game they've got is
the Eels
Parramatta game in round 18, which will be in Penrith. And if Penrith are playing as well as they can, with home field advantage, may not even be an underdog in that. So, but that counts for nothing unless you win the games you're supposed to. I mentioned how good Parramatta were in the last month. So were Penrith. Penrith had an awesome month of footy. The only game they lost was a game they led 10-0 to Parramatta. So no disgrace there. Even the Bunnies game you mentioned, they conceded a try in the final play against 11 men. So you're right. Maybe that score should really suggested the game was closer than it truly was. West are off back-to-back wins, but I mentioned as well in the recap, the soft kills. Who'd they beat? The Cowboys and the Dogs.
Yeah.
So for West, the challenge is always beating teams that are better than them. I know I said this last week too, but you look at Luke Brooks. If West are to cause an upset, I feel like Brooks needs to outplay Cleary. Don't necessarily think he will. I give the Tigers forward pack more credit than you. A guy who's a real player is Luciano Leilua. That guy can play. He's just a triple threat when he has the ball. He's got the strength, tackle breaking. He's got the flick passes, offloads. I like the West Tigers team. They're still missing Alex Twelve, but I think that the Panthers are a class above, and we can lay a low number here. So I think we've got to do it and jump on Penrith to keep their roll.
We are doing it. We've got three best bets on the game. We are taking the Panthers minus 4 points. That one is $1.91 on BetEasy. We're going to take the Panthers team total over 19.5 points. That one's $1.82 on Sportsbet. And the last one is the Panthers team total over 9.5 points in the first half. That one's $1.80 on Ladbrokes.
To echo what you said, I love a 9-day turnaround against a 6-day turnaround.
Yeah.
Could be the difference here too, because there's a couple of sore bodies on the Panthers, like kick out, shoulder, and obviously Cleary. So works nicely for them to get a win here.
Absolutely. Let's move on to the Sea Eagles up against the Knights. The Sea Eagles are 1.5 point underdogs. The total sitting at 42.5 points. Look, I like the Knights in this one, and maybe I'm being square, and maybe I'm thinking about what every average punter will think of. But look, Manly had a shocker last week, and they just got jumped on early by the Sharks. The Sharks played very well, and, obviously missing Turbo, missing Dylan Walker. Most people may just think, well, Manly aren't the same team. Obviously, it would have been great if Manly won that game, and everyone thinks they don't need those two guys. But same with the Knights last week. Now, they just had an absolute shocker against the Cowboys, but I am going to put that down to they just were not prepared for that one. They overlooked the Cowboys. Whereas Manly, I think there is something to be said about how important Tommy Turbo is to that team. Now, I think some people might just underrate what he actually means to that team in terms of a point spread. You saw with Cherry Evans last week, he really did struggle without those two guys there to create. And maybe that'll get better this week, but I am sure that the Knights will be better this week. They get back Bradman Best, who's been awesome for them. And look, I know that the Knights are a small favourite. I know that the game is at Lotto Land in this one, but I think I can make the argument that, the Knights have the better forwards, the better spine, and the better outside backs. So I think the Knights do win this game with a short line, and we've got some decent bets on it.
In the last 6 seasons, we've done 6 seasons of this, but even before we started doing the pod, a mantra that has always worked is taking a good team off a bad loss. Only problem we have here is They're both good teams and they're both off a bad loss, but I think the Knights are the better team without Trbojevic and without Walker. Now, you mentioned Bradman Best back is a big boost, but mention the other gun centre as well. Moses Sully is back for Manly as well. And I am wary of a Lottoland ambush. I know how Manly will play. They will want to win the forward back. They will forward paddle. They will want to out-grind. They will want to stop the game every moment with, ball control, Cherry Evans, game control, kicking for touch, similar to the game plan that the Cowboys utilised to nullify Ponga last week. I actually think that's an advantage to the Knights that they've seen that game plan and they've seen it work against them last week. They should actually have some measures to counteract this one. And you're right, it does feel a little bit square, but ultimately I do believe the Knights are superior and you can't replace Turbo. And it's such a low line that it's as simple as we just got to take the better team here.
Yeah, and also the fact that we think that this line might leak out to 2.5 by game day. We're taking 4 best bets for today. We're taking the Knights laying 1.5 points for the game. That's $2 on Lads and Neds. We're going to take the Knights to win the first half in a two-way market, $1.81 on Sportsbet. The Knights to win the second half in a two-way market, $1.82 on BetEasy. And the Knights team total under... Oh, hang on. What have I got there?
That should be Manly.
That should be Manly team total under 20.5 points. If you're looking at that, that's Manly under 20.5 points at $1.86 on BetEasy. So many best bets.
That's our one and only under. I think we're playing across the board this week because we just feel Manly are short of points. And even if they play well, they need this to be an arm wrestle. I don't think they can beat anybody in a track meet, as we saw last week against the Sharks.
Indeed. Let's move on to the last game of round 8, and it is the Bulldogs up against the Rabbitohs. The Bulldogs are 11.5 point underdogs with the total sitting at 40.5 points. This one being played at Bankwest, and it's going to be interesting to see how the Bankwest surface holds up. I think 3 games at Bankwest this weekend. Now, look, usually it's very square to take a big favourite in the NRL, but in this case, I don't think it is. Because the Rabbits could not have played worse on the first game, the Thursday, very first game of round 7 against the Panthers. 12 errors. Latrell was the worst he's looked all season long. And you just look at the comments in our group and in our app. Never betting on the Rabbitohs again. Rabbitohs are trash. We'll never touch them with a 10-foot pole again. So it's not that square to take this Rabbit side, and I think, they're going to be much better, and there's no better time to take a good team, which this Rabbits team is. It's a good team, off a long layoff. This is a Sunday game against the Bulldogs. They played on Thursday last week against the Panthers, off a terrible performance, and by far their worst performance of the year. So I expect the Rabbits to turn this one around. Not only that, I've always talked about how this Bulldogs side really struggles to put on points. I can't see him putting more than a couple of tries in this one, especially without Hopewadi, without Avarillo. And on top of that, with the not new rules, but the adjustments to the rules this week, I think it is going to be a little easier for teams to, keep more ball possession, lay on the pressure, and run up the score. And I think that's what's going to happen in this one.
When I watched the Bunnies play last week, we spoke about how we really liked McGrath and expected a great performance, and we didn't get it. And I was soul-searching. Am I too high on the Rabbitohs? Are they not as good as I think? But really, give a bit of credit to Penrith for the way they played in that game. You mentioned the errors. Rabbitohs had a ton of errors in a Storm game a few weeks ago in a Storm game, and that the final score blew out in that one. It was actually a lot closer, and that was before they had Cody Walker as well. And they actually played the Roosters as tough as just about anyone has been able to. And then they beat a couple teams in the Titans and the Warriors that nobody cared. No one gave them credit for those wins. So they haven't had like a statement win yet. I do think they'll get back on track. And you mentioned it's just hard for the Bulldogs to score points as it is, and you lose Hopewadi. People might think, this is the week they get their gun British import Luke Thompson in. But He's going to play a small cameo off the bench, really. They're just
Right.
trying to get match fitness into him. He's had to self-isolate for 2 weeks. So as exciting as it is for the club to get this guy, and I hope he's everything he's built up to be, he doesn't move the needle for me this week. And that's why I'm not afraid to lay the points with the Rabbitohs. It should be too good in this one.
Well, I don't think he's going to play. There's no way because he wouldn't have been able to have contact training or anything for the last couple of weeks. So
Yeah, well, he can play, and I think they're just figuring the sooner they get him in there, the sooner he can get match fitness.
Sure.
But I'm just warning people that might think he could be the difference maker. That's quite unlikely this week.
Totally agree. We've got 3 best bets on the Rabbitohs for now. We are making a mechanical Rabbitohs minus 9.5 points. It ends up being $1.80. Your main stake will be on Ladbrokes and on Neds with the $2 lines. Lay the 10.5. And then you're going to put a little bit on the Rabbitohs to win by exactly 10. The best price on that is Sportsbet. I'm going to take the Rabbits minus 5.5 points in the first half, $1.89 on BetEasy. And we're going to take the Rabbitohs minus 5.5 points in the second half. That's $1.85 on Ladbrokes and on Neds. That's going to wrap it, guys, for round 8. Look, we are on an absolute roll at the moment. And look, I was just saying to Jacob before this pod, it's about time we had a bad week, but hopefully it's not this one. We're going to ride this wave for as long as we can. So thanks for tuning in. Thanks for your support, and we'll catch you in the app and in the group, and we'll catch you at Sunday night at 9:30 p.m. for a recap of round 8. See you then.
Lego.